the Oosterhout Free Library with a really cool American tall tale by Mary Pope Osborne. Two things I think are fun about this one. One, you've probably never heard of it. And two, there's a joke in it that I really like. This is about a sailor. So we have two new books that he would like that you could call and ask for, no contact pickup. This is called Seagulls Soar by April Pulley Sayre, S-A-Y-R-E. And it's a nonfiction picture book. And then at a higher reading level, but something everybody of all ages could like, this is called The World of Whales. Get to know the giants of the ocean. And it's just packed with illustrations and all kinds of information. The author's last name is Dobell, D-O-B-E-L-L. So give us a call for no contact pickup. Here are two other new books that I'm excited about because I get a lot of requests for R.L. Stine's Goosebumps. And here is Slappy's World, Diary of a Dummy. That'll be a hit. And also, we get a lot of requests for Geronimo Stilton. Here's The Sticky Situation. So give us a call for no contact pickup. You could also take out this book if you want. Now we have the story of Stormalong. And it is set in Massachusetts and in the days of the old sailing ships called Yankee Clippers. One day in the early 1800s, a tidal wave crashed down on the shores of Cape Cod in New England. After the wave had washed back out to sea, the villagers heard deep, bellowing sounds coming from the beach. When they rushed out to find out what was going on, they couldn't believe their eyes. A giant baby, 3 fathoms, or 18 feet, tall, was crawling across the sand, crying in a voice as loud as a foghorn. The villagers put the baby in a big wheelbarrow and carried him to town. They took him to the meeting house and fed him barrels and barrels of milk. As 10 people patted the baby on the back, the minister said, "What will we name him?" "How about Alfred Bulltop Stormalong?" a little boy piped up. "Call him Stormy for short." The baby smiled at the boy, then let out a gigantic burp that nearly blew the roof off the meeting house. "Stormy it is!" everyone cried. As he grew older, Stormy was the main attraction of Cape Cod. He didn't care for all the attention, however. It reminded him that he was different from everyone else. After school, he always tried to slip away to the sea. He liked to swim out to the deep water and ride the whales and porpoises. Stormy's love for the ocean was so strong that folks used to say he had salt water in his veins. By the time Stormy was 12, he was already 6 fathoms tall, 36 feet. "I guess you're going to have to go out into the world now," his friend said sadly. "The truth is, you've grown too big for this town. You can't fit in the schoolhouse. You're too tall to work in a store. Maybe you should go to Boston. It's bigger than Cape Cod." Stormy felt like an outcast as he packed his trunk, hoisted it over his shoulder, and started away. But when he arrived in Boston, he discovered something that made him even sadder. Although the city had more buildings than Cape Cod, they were just as small. Worse than that, his huge size and foghorn voice scared the daylights out of everyone he met. "A sailor's life is the only one for me," he said, staring longingly at Boston Harbor. "The sea's my best friend. It's with her that I belong." With his back to Boston, Stormy strode towards the biggest Yankee clipper docked in the harbor, the Lady of the Sea. "Blow me down," said the captain when Stormy stood before him. "I've never seen a man big as you before." "I'm not a man," said Stormy. "I'm 12 years old." "Blow me down again," said the captain. "I guess you'll have to be the biggest cabin boy in the world then. Welcome aboard, son." The sailors were a bit shocked when the captain introduced the 36-foot giant as their new cabin boy. But the day soon came when all the sailors of the Lady of the Sea completely accepted Stormy's awesome size. It happened one morning when the clipper was anchored off the coast of South America. "Hoist the anchor!" the captain shouted after a few hours of deep-sea fishing. But when the crew pulled on the great chain, nothing happened. The sailors heaved and hoed and still could not move the anchor off the bottom of the ocean. "Heave! Ho!" "Let me take care of it," Stormy boomed. Then the cabin boy stuck a knife between his teeth, climbed onto the bowsprit, and dived into the sea. After Stormy disappeared, terrible sounds came from the water. The ship began pitching and tossing on wild, foaming waves. It seemed that all aboard were about to be hurled into a wet grave, when suddenly the sea grew calm again, and Stormy bobbed to the surface. Hand over hand he climbed the great anchor chain, nearly pulling the ship on her side with his great weight. As soon as he was safely aboard, he yanked up the anchor, and once again the Lady of the Sea began to glide through the ocean. "What happened?" cried the crew. "Just a little fight with a 2-ton octopus," said Stormy. "Octopus? Aye, he didn't want to let go of our anchor." "What'd you do to him?" the others cried. "Wrestled 8 slimy tentacles into double knots. It'll take a month of Sundays for him to untie himself." From then on, Stormy was the most popular sailor on board. Over the next few years, his reputation spread too, until all the Yankee clipper crews wanted him to sail with them. But Stormy still wasn't happy. Partly it was because no ship, not even the Lady of the Sea, was big enough for him. He would nearly tip it over when he stood close to the rail. All her wood pulled off when he scrubbed her decks. The giant waves rolled over her sides when he sang. Worst of all, Stormy was still lonely. The clippers' hammocks were so small that at night he had to sleep by himself in a rowboat. As he listened to the other sailors singing and having a good time, he felt as if his best friend, the sea, had betrayed him. Maybe it was time for the giant sailor to move on. One day, when the Lady of the Sea dropped anchor in Boston, Stormy announced to his friends that he decided to give up the seafaring life. "I'm going to put an oar over my shoulder and head west," he said. "I hear there's room enough for any kind of folks out there, even ones as big as me." "Where will you settle down, Stormy?" a sailor asked. "I'm going to walk till the first person asks me, 'Hey, mister, what's that funny thing you got on your shoulder there?' Then I'll know I'm far enough away from the sea that I won't ever think about it again." Stormy walked through the cities of Providence and New York. He walked through the Pine Barrens in New Jersey and the woods of Pennsylvania. He crossed the Allegheny Mountains and floated on flatboats down the Ohio River. Pioneers often invited Stormy to share their dinner, but these occasions only made him homesick, for folks always guessed that he was a sailor and asked him questions about the sea. It wasn't until Stormy came to the plains of Kansas that a farmer said, "Hey, mister, what's that funny thing you got on your shoulder there?" "You asked the right question, mate," said Stormy. "I'm going to settle down right on this spot and grow potatoes." And that's just what Stormy did. Soon he became the best farmer around. He planted over 5 million potatoes and watered them with the sweat of his brow. But all the time Stormy was watering, hoeing, picking, and planting, he knew he had still not found a home. He was too big to go square dancing in the dance hall. He was too big to visit other farmhouses, too big for the meeting house, and too big for the general store. And he felt a great yearning for the sea. He missed the fishy-smelling breezes and the salt spray. Never did the prairies have a giant wave knock him to his knees. Never did a hurricane whirl him across the earth. How could he ever test his true strength and courage? One day, several years after Stormy's disappearance, the sailors of Boston saw a giant coming down the wharf, waving his oar above his head. As he approached, they began to whoop with joy. Stormy was back! But as happy as they were to see him, they were horrified when they discovered how bad he looked. He was all stooped over. His face was like a withered cornstalk, and there were pale bags under his eyes. After word spread about Stormy's condition, thousands of sailors met to talk about the problem. "We've got to keep him this time," one said. "There's only one way to do it," another said. "Build a ship that's big enough." Aye, the others agreed. We can't have him trail behind us at night in his own rowboat. So the New England sailors set about building the biggest clipper ship in the world. Her sails had to be cut and sewn in the Mojave Desert. And after she was built, there was a lumber shortage all over America. It took 40 seamen just to manage her pilot's wheel, unless, of course, the captain was Alfred Bulltop Stormalong, who could whirl the ship's wheel with his baby finger. Stormalong named the clipper the Courser. On the maiden voyage, he clutched the courser's wheel and steered her out of Boston Harbor. As he soared over the billowy waves, his cheeks glowed with sunburn, his hair sparkled with ocean spray, and the salt water began coursing through his veins again. Soon, Stormy and the Courser were taking cargoes all over the world, to India, China, and Europe. It took 4 weeks to get all hands on deck. Teams of white horses carried sailors from stem to stern. The ship's towering mast had to be hinged to let the sun and moon go by. The tips of the masts were padded so they didn't punch holes in the sky. The vessel was so big that once, when she hit an island in the Caribbean Sea, she knocked it clear into the Gulf of Mexico. But one of the Courser's most memorable escapades took place in the English Channel. When she tried to sail between Calais and the dark cliffs of Dover, her crew discovered the width of her beam was wider than the passageway. Okay, so this is the joke I like. It's impossible to wedge her through, the first mate cried. We have to turn back. Hurry, before she crashes on the rocks, another said. No, don't bring her back, bellowed Stormy from the captain's wheel. Bring all the soap on deck. The crew thought Stormy had lost his mind, but they went below and hauled up the 3-ton shipment of soap just picked up from Holland. Now swab her sides until she is slippery as an eel, Stormy ordered. Aye, the sailors shouted, and they sang as they plastered the Courser's sides with white soap. Now take it through, said Stormy. The ship's sails caught the wind. Stormalong eased her between the Dover cliffs and Calais. Ever since then, the white cliffs of Dover have been as milky white as a whale's belly, and the sea below still foams with soap spuds. See, that's the joke I like. The white cliffs of Dover on the English Channel separate Dover in Great Britain from France. They've always been white because of a kind of limestone that is called chalk. For years, Stormalong was the most famous sea captain in the world. Sailors in every port told how he ate ostrich eggs for breakfast, 100 gallons of whale soup for lunch, and a warehouse full of shark meat for dinner. They told how after every meal he'd pick his teeth with an 18-foot oar. Some said it was the same oar he once carried to Kansas. But it was also said that sometimes when the crew sang songs late at night, the giant captain would stand alone on the deck, gazing out at sea with a look of unfathomable sorrow in his eyes. After the Civil War, steamships began to transport cargo over the seas. The days of the great sailing ships came to an end, and the courageous men who steered the beautiful Yankee clippers across the ocean also began to disappear. No one remembers quite how old Stormalong was when he died, or how. All they recollect was his funeral. It seemed that one foggy twilight, thousands of sailors attended his funeral. They covered him with 100 yards of the finest China silk, and then 50 sailors carried his huge coffin to a grave near the sea. As they dug into the sand with a silver spade and lowered his coffin with a silver cord, they wept tears like rain. And for years afterward they sang about him. Old Stormy's dead and gone to rest. To my way, hey, Stormalong. Of all the sailors he was the best. Aye, Mr. Stormalong. Ever since then, seamen first class put the initials ABS after their names. Most people think it means able-bodied seamen, but the old New England seafaring men know different. They know it stands for the most amazing deep-water sailor who ever lived, Alfred Bulltop Stormalong. Any ideas what to read next? Give us a call here at the Oosterhout Free Library.